Hello and welcome to this third part of the three-part presentation, and as promised, we're finally going to get to talk about some solutions to these massive problems that we've been looking at. Alan Greenspan, who was the head of the Federal Reserve forever, told an ABC News interviewist, "The Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government that can overrule actions that we take." Well, it turns out that he meant that the Federal Reserve stands above the U.S. government, and the government needs to stay out of their business. In fact, let's take a look at this. Back in 2008, we had a $700 billion bailout, biggest bailout in American history. Turns out there was a little tiny audit that was done, first ever of the Federal Reserve. Did about 1,000th of what we would like to find out about them, but they looked at 2008 and exactly how they handled this. Turns out that the Fed had a little bailout of their own, right? $7.77 trillion bailout, which was a big secret. Nobody in the government knew about it. No government process, no government oversight. $7.77 trillion. So you wonder how these guys can pull this off. Well, let's take a look at that. Woodrow Wilson, U.S. president, was in office in 1913 when the Federal Reserve Act passed, and he was one who signed it in. And he later wrote, said, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." Well, how is it that they don't have all of the politicians, our representatives, come in and say, "Hey, you can't do this. No, we got to stop that"? Well, interesting answer to that one, too. Another U.S. president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, sent a private letter that later became public. This was to Colonel E. Mandel House, and in it he said, "The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government of the U.S. since the days of Andrew Jackson." Wow. Hey, I'm glad he said that, because if I said that, I'd sound like a nut. You got to say that about 50 times before it really sinks in. Owned the government of the U.S. since the days of Andrew Jackson. Unbelievable. So, how do they pull this off? Well, it turns out that there's one trick that the bankers have that makes them so powerful. And this was told to us by the second richest man in Britain back in the 20s. He owned a bank, was a big shot. And this was Sir Josiah Stamp. And he wrote, "Banking was conceived in inequity and was born in sin. The bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create deposits. And with the flick of the pen, they will create enough deposits to buy it back again." So here's the line. Here's the center of the banker's power. But leave them the power to create deposits, and with the flick of the pen, they will create enough deposits to buy it back again. Create deposits, that's this whole concept of making money out of nothing. That is the source of the wealth and great power that these people exercise. Mr. Stamp went on to say, "However, take it away from them and all the great fortunes like mine will disappear, and they ought to disappear. For this would be a happier and better world to live in. But if you wish to remain the slaves of bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create deposits." Well, I don't think I really wish to continue to be the slave and actually pay my own slavehood or pay the way. So let's see what we can do to correct this. First off, we know that the bankers have this trick. They magically create money out of nothing, and because of it, they take on these proportions of being hugely, greatly powerful within society, right? Well, let me ask you this. If they're all so powerful, how come they're doing all this in secret? How come they're hiding in the dark like little cockroaches, see? No. They're afraid. They're afraid of something because there's one thing that is absolutely more powerful than them. Let's take a look at one of the Rothschilds said. They are kind of the chief international bankers. I think they own Europe or something of that nature. And the head of their clan said, the few who understand the system will either be so interested from its profits or so dependent on its favors that there will be no opposition from that class. Well, when we look at this opposition from that class being people who understand the system, a lot of people understand the system now, and if we have our way, a lot more are going to understand the system, and they're going to have a considerable problem. They depend on us feeling like we're a little cog in a machine or some sort of a sheep where we think to ourselves that what can we do because we're just one man and, right? No. Look, they want to tower over us. They think that they are God. And they're convinced us that they are God, but they aren't for this one reason. We look up democracy, dictionary.com. We take this out of their definition. It says a form of government in which the supreme power is vested in the people. Louis Brandeis, Supreme Court Justice, put it this way. He said the only title in our democracy superior to that of president is the title of citizen. In other words, we're like the king of this land. And sometimes we might forget that we're kings, but there is a problem also that comes into this whole kinghood thing. Thomas Jefferson put it this way. He said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. So even though we may be kings, if we are ignorant, if we don't know what is going on, then we can be bamboozled and hoodwinked and made to be the sheep because we're convinced that we're the sheep. And we're the king, so if we're convinced we're sheep, since we're king and ruler of all, then hey, we're sheep. So Henry Ford, he had this line. We saw this earlier. I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning if everybody understood what was going on. Revolutions are kind of messy things. Our forefathers, they had one. And it was all bloody and all messy. In fact, they had to march through all the cold and the snow so much that all their shoes fell apart. And then they had all this frostbite. They're all freezing to death. And it even got worse because then they were starving to death. True story, they were eating their shoes. The generals had to go around and say, son, don't eat your shoes. I mean, that's pretty tough. I don't know about you. I'm a picky eater. I don't want to have a revolution. They had a revolution so that we don't have to. See, we're the supreme power in this land. And I will tell you that the international bankers know this very well. Thomas Jefferson said, we in America do not have government by the majority. We have government by the majority who participate. Look, solutions in a democracy are actually quite simple and they're always the same. We need to get the majority, at least the majority of those who participate, to be knowledgeable enough to make a wise decision, and then everything else comes into perspective. There really is no other solution within a democracy, and if we put our mind to it and we focus on that one task, we're going to find actually that it's quite easy. We have been convinced that we're as rich of a nation as we have dollar bills floating around, and that's completely false. We are as rich as we produce and exchange valuable goods and services. That is our affluence. That's our power. But we're like a businessman, owns a business, has lots of business coming in, going out, lots of customers, he's working himself to death, and can never understand why he's not more affluent, only to find the guy at the cash register puts the majority of what's coming in into his own pocket, and he lives up on the hill. This guy's got 17 cars. They're all like Ferraris and Lamborghinis. You see, our problem is that the richest people in our society have gotten there off of our labors. They haven't given us anything except for all this confusion and havoc. We used to think, well, they give us capital, right? Well, no, they don't. They make it out of thin air. That's their secret. So our path is simple. We can either ride this unraveling economy down into the end. We can have all the political upheaval and all of that. We're the last, where they say we're the last superpower, right? Well, you look back into history, all these superpowers, and there's been a bunch of them come before us. And almost all of them died from economic problems. Not from being taken over in war or something of that nature, and we're following that same path. If we let this unravel, the chances that we are going to leave to future generations the America that was given to us are quite slim in actual fact. But there are simple things that we can do. We just need to make the democratic process work. We need to go out. Hey, how hard is it? We don't have to eat shoe leather. We can eat pizza and beer and send this link around. See? And enough people make this grow viral. Or maybe there's other materials. It's not about this video. It's about whatever we can do to bring our friends, neighbors, co-workers, and strangers to a point where they understand what's going on. We need to each become active. We need to go out and let our representatives know that the funny business is over. This is all coming to an end, and we need to have them do investigations into this that are not whitewash kind of investigations, but are going to shine the light of truth on exactly what is going on. The website that we are putting together is designed to be a central website to allow you to find all of the tools that you need to help you convince all of these different people, friends and neighbors and whatnot. And we will have all of the recommendations that we have as far as what you can go out and do to be effective and become active. I'd like to end with this favorite quote of all time for me. All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. So I want you to go, take a look in the mirror, and you decide exactly which route we're going to follow. See, you're king. You tell us, what are we going to do? Are we going to sit there and do nothing? Are we going to let it all unravel? Or are we going to get busy and active? Or are we going to get intelligent and learn exactly what we need to know? Please figure that out. Get back to us, because we'd really like to know what our future is going to look like.